See, it looks like we're live now. So, hey guys, how are you doing? My name is John Schwartz. I want to give you a little bit of background on who I am before we start. Since there's quite a few of you already watching, I figured we might as well start. So, I've been doing laser cutter sales, repair, and operation for about 10 years now. So, I have quite a lot of experience with these things. I've done a couple thousand repairs at this point. I do about an average of three a week. So, someone could figure out what that works out to. It's a lot. And hello to all you guys that are just signing on. I see you there. Um, basically, we're going to cover a couple of different topics here. We're going to do what is the difference between American and Chinese laser cutters, laser cutting software, basic maintenance, and then answering questions as well. So we're probably not going to end up spending that much time in any independent section, I imagine, because I imagine there's going to be a lot of questions. So I just want to say that you guys can ask questions at any time, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. If they get too in depth or they're too individual, basically, like if it's a really complex problem, it's probably not something we'll be able to get into today. We probably want to start with the more basic stuff that everyone that everyone really wants to know. So let's see what time it is. All right, so it's 5:01. So we'll wait just one more minute to allow more people to log on if they want to. Until then, if there's any questions, start asking. Okay, so let's see. I kind of work with K40s. I mostly do basic stuff with K40s. I don't do all of the upgrades that people are looking for. So that's kind of a problem. I actually get asked quite a lot about, hey, can you help me with this one particular upgrade? And if it's not original to the machine, I probably can't help you with it because I tend to do OEM software. And so I work a lot with the other larger Chinese laser cutters, the type that actually have like RD Works in them, that type of machine. Okay, so tuning up a K40, there is actually quite a lot that you could do. Wow, that's a huge upgrade. I'm reading the text. If you did a 100-watt upgrade to a K40, that is amazing, I have to say. Don't say. Sorry, being interrupted slightly. Can you grab that? Yes. I'm not familiar with the Ortur 20-watt. You may have to elaborate a little bit more. Is that like a fiber laser, or is that one of those tiny little ones that has like a little milliwatt laser on it? I would really need to know. Okay, but so let's go back to the K40 because there's a lot of questions about the K40. Yeah, LED laser, I can't really help you with those. They're just a little too simple for me to really work with. I mean, they're kind of fun, and it's good to get you into the industry, but other than that, a K40 is probably a better place to start. I don't believe that the tube can handle that. It's probably like a 30-watt. You technically could put it on, but the chances of blowing the power supply are extremely high. When people put power supplies into these machines, what they're generally doing is they actually put a power supply in that is more powerful than the tube can handle. And they do that just to make sure that if anything a little hinky happens, that there aren't any problems, really. If you go the other way and you do a power supply that's smaller than the tube, you really do actually have good chances of blowing it. I wouldn't really recommend it. The other thing is that fitting all of those parts into a K40 could be potentially difficult, and you need to look at the cost benefit of whether or not you actually want to just get another machine versus a K40, because it kind of sounds like, based off what you're doing and the power that you're looking for, you may actually want to go to that black and red, one of those blue and white machines, or they even have green. The color changes all the time. But the point is that one of those RD Works machines, you probably want to go there. And that would probably help you out. Okay, so give me a sec. I got to read some stuff here. Okay, so Eric K asked, can I recommend any YouTube videos or tutorials about getting started with photo engraving, dithering, and rastering? And yes, I can. So there's a guy that goes by like Sabre Multimedia. His actual video series is called RD Works Learning Lab. He is amazing. He worked in the industry for about 20 years in a different type of laser, and then kind of got one of these as a hobby, and he knows a lot. Let's just put it that way. All right, let's keep going. Wow, you guys do have some questions. All right. So I'm really sorry if I get your guys' names wrong. I'm really bad with names. So there's Eric McNeil. I'm expecting my machine to get here in 2 weeks from China. Is it necessary to upgrade your air assist? I've seen a lot of videos. Probably yes. I personally have upgraded all my machines to the max, and they can't handle that much because the airlines are fairly small. But I have this little meter that measures airflow, and I went from, it was something like 6 psi to 9 psi, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's actually a significant increase. So it gives you a lot more options, particularly if you're working with different materials. Some materials like more air, some materials like less air. So for example, when you're cutting acrylic, you want tons and tons of air, and particularly coming in and going out. Both of those are really important. And if you're cutting wood, you actually need less airflow, not going out, but coming in. And so I would really say that, yes, you should upgrade. It's a very cheap and easy upgrade for you to do. But also don't forget to make sure that you have a valve that allows you to adjust the airflow, because otherwise, if it's just max airflow all the time, it could actually be worse than what you originally started with. So let's see the next one. So let's talk about things like Alex Kerslin's question. Do you know anything about the 100-watt Decker 6090? So I may not know your specific brand, and this really gets into the first question about that I wanted to raise about the difference between American and Chinese lasers. So let's start with Chinese lasers. You guys pretty much all seem to be running Chinese lasers like I do. I actually have about 5 at the moment. The number varies. I sell some, I buy some. It depends. But the most powerful one that I have in shop is 130 watt. I ordered 180 watt, and I may even get into metal soon just because so many people are interested. But for you guys, the thing is, there's really only a couple of factories that make laser cutters, so it's really hard to tell if the guy that you're working with is actually, a legitimate rep from the factory, or if they're a secondary guy that is just trying to basically sell lasers. They are really good at hiding it, but the thing is that you want to try and stick with the most known and reputable brands, because there really is a difference in the customer service that you're going to get and the quality of the machine. But I don't know that particular machine. Doesn't mean I don't know it, because it's probably just a rebranded machine from another factory. So let's see. I've got a good breakdown on basic maintenance for my red black. We'll do the basic maintenance in a minute. But so the Chinese machines, they're pretty good, actually. Once you get up to the level that you have, it's generally a 60 watt or above. It'll come with a full controller, generally an LCD controller that has a little screen on it. Things like RD Works. RD Works is the most popular one with RUDA controllers, so we'll basically stick with that. The other controllers are extremely similar. They're almost identical, actually. They tend to use slightly different language. Sometimes they have a feature that one has that the other one doesn't, and vice versa, but 99% of it is the same. So we'll basically stick with one as the example for today. Um, what I would say is that when you're comparing a Chinese to an American machine, there's actually not that much difference between them. The biggest differences come in, yes, the build quality will be slightly lower, but not much. And the customer service won't be nearly as good, even though honestly, because I do repair, I also have an understanding of how well these guys are doing customer service. Nobody's doing great customer service right now. I get a lot of requests from all kinds of brands, even American brands, to do repair. And these people are just telling me they're saying 4 to 8 weeks for somebody to just, email me back type of deal, which isn't great, which is basically why I started doing what I do. Uh, I had the same problems that you guys had. The first machine that I ever bought, I put in my basement. It was one of those little blue and white machines. It leaked 20 gallons before I found the little spot that was actually unhooked. So when I got to that point, yeah, I agree with. Sorry, I agree with Blake. Maybe we should hold the questions. They're coming on really fast, and I won't be able to answer them until we get to the next section. Um, but so basically, it was that inspired me to get into this. And since I spent so much time trying to repair this, I started getting a little bit good at it. And I started working with some factories. I've worked with a few factories over the years. And it gave me a really good knowledge of how every aspect of it works from conception to completion. So I literally import these machines from China. So I get I, I get all the problems that you guys are having. I have them every day. So let's go back to the comparison. Basically, an American machine is on average 10 times more expensive than a Chinese machine. But that doesn't mean that you're getting 10 times more benefit from that American machine. I would actually say that you're not. For the most part, American machines are better at things like 3D engraving and dithering and specialized artwork stuff I never really do personally, and I do this professionally. So the number of times I've personally done dithering is 2 or 3 times because uh, sorry, I need to shut off the chat so I can't see it for a second. It's just getting a little too distracting. So basically, I've never used these features that the American ones do. And honestly, you can do this stuff on the Chinese machines. However, it tends to be a little bit harder. The uh, the the emphasis tends to be more on artwork and preparation than it does on anything else. So what I would say is that if you can do the artwork and the prep, you will be able to do pretty much anything the American machines can. And this kind of goes into the next section, software. There is new software these days that is so much more powerful than the original software that came with these machines. You could get things like Lightburn, which is pretty much it, and it works on most controllers. And it will really amp up what your machine can do, but you have to do a little bit of installation. You really have to play with it. I personally have had some issues with Lightburn, but I like it for the most part. And what I would really say about Lightburn is that it bridges the gap between the American and Chinese machines. It basically allows you to do things like that dithering, or like I could draw something on a piece of paper, put it in the machine type of deal. And all you have to do is install a camera in order to make that happen. It's $80. I personally don't sell it. You have to go to lightburn.com if you want to get it. They give you a 7-day free trial, so it's probably worth trying. So let's see. Now I could take a look at the chat for a second and answer a few questions. What I'm working on, couldn't you go right to Alibaba and find a supplier? Well, that is exactly still the same problem because unless you really do your research, you're not going to be able to tell the real suppliers from the fake suppliers. Fake suppliers will show you photos and videos of this massive warehouse that they work in. But honestly, the way that a lot of it works is that one company will manufacture these and they may have a floor of salesmen. And these salesmen are essentially independent agents that are working by themselves and are just basically creating their own brands. But it is another machine. A lot of these come from HK, KH. Those are the two names that you tend to get a lot. It's the Red and Black company. They make most of the machines that you get on eBay. I would really, unless you're good at engineering, I would probably stay away from those machines. And it is worth spending a little bit of extra money. What supplier would I recommend outside of me? I could put together a small list. It's a little hard for me to think on the spot right now. Um, Probably the best one that I can think of at the moment would be Thunder. Um, OM Tech, I don't know them. They could easily be one of those small suppliers. But Thunder Laser, they actually make their own machines that are different from any other machines on the market. I've had them. They are a little bit more expensive, but sometimes it's worth it to put a little bit of extra money into these things. It really depends. The the black and reds that you get from eBay, the problem with them is that there's a high probability that what it is a machine that was essentially put together with scrap parts. And HK, KH, whatever you want to call them, they basically put together machines that have been with rejected parts from other companies. And their goal is to let it last about 30 days. Red Sale is good. I actually rep Red Sale. The reason that they want it to last 30 days is that that's the buyer protection on most products from Amazon or eBay. And once they get past that, you won't hear from them. I mean, some of them are okay, but for the most part, these guys, what they're doing is that they're buying just different things from China and selling them. And a lot of them, they may sell hair straighteners and laser cutters. I've literally seen that. So that means that they don't really have a good appreciation for what the machine is, and you're not actually getting any customer service from them directly. What happens is they'll ask you to send a video, send some text, as much as you possibly can, and they will forward that on to the actual manufacturer. So let's see. Yeah, Orion Motors is also okay. They're only okay though. I mean, I've had a lot of machine repairs for Orion Motors. Octoprint. I don't know Octoprint, so I can't answer that question. There really are only two or three uh, basic softwares. It's either going to be Lightburn or it's going to be whatever came with the machine. And I honestly use what came with the machine most of the time. I'm still putting Lightburn through its paces. I have one test. I just haven't gotten around to the last test. Or when I do, I will tell you guys about it. Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. I actually also know the Lightburn guys. I was one of the original beta testers. They probably don't remember because a million people beta tested it. But even before he actually launched anything, it was something that we were talking about because, I do repair. I know a little bit about machines. So we did actually discuss it at one point, and I basically went off the Lightburn roster because there were just too many problems in the original beta testing. And I'm running a business. I can't beta test something forever. But at this point, I do really like it. I think it is worth the money. Let's see. Don't know Prenex. I mean, guys, I'm not going to know 90% of these brands because they are resell. These are, like I said, these are agents that are basically selling them. The better thing to do is to probably go with people like Red Sail, who actually invented the red and black and everybody copied from. They are a good company. I've been having some serious shipping issues lately with them, but I think everybody's having some shipping issues. Normally, it's 4 to 6 weeks to get your machine. Right now, I'd say it's probably about double. Open source software. That's an interesting question. There really isn't any open source software for these type of machines. Um, it's really just the two. I mean, there are one or two. Yeah, K40 Whisper is open source, but that's only for the K40. That doesn't actually work on anything else. And most people, when they get there, they actually want to try and upgrade their K40 to the point where they have a proper controller in it. Because when you get the K40, as many of you will know, it basically is just the power control is on a knob on the machine. And that's not a great way of doing it. So that's why everyone loves to upgrade it. And it is worth probably, if you're going to be any type of serious about this, go one level above the K40 at least. I mean, you may not get a lot of time out of the machine, but it will give you a much better perspective of what they can do. Let's see. Or Pascal. Yeah, Eric, that does actually sound kind of familiar. I would have to look at my emails. Pascal, that name sounds familiar because most of the guys are from China. Very few of the salesmen are American or Mexican or Canadian. There are a couple, but not many. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know what the MeerKit 4D is. Couldn't answer that. What I'm working on, either you're going to be using Lightburn or you are going to be using the default program. There really isn't anything else. Ha! So for fiber lasers, that's probably going to be a different video. What I would recommend, though, for the fiber laser, just to give a little brief thing, is that you have to make sure that the height is exactly correct. The focal point on fiber lasers is much tighter than it is on CO2 laser cutters. So even if you're like a tenth of a millimeter off, it may not engrave. So I would definitely make sure that your height is 100% correct. And then what I generally do is I start is what I call 50-50-50. You start just in the middle of what the machine can do. So say the machine's able to do 100% power, you do 50 speed, 50 power. And that's like essentially right in the middle, assuming that the machine could do 100% speed and 100% power. You can alter it from there depending on your need. So it's like, if you know the machine can engrave at 400, the middle speed's going to be 200. And if you know that you could go to 100% power, it's still going to be 50. So that is basically how I develop scales and powers. One level above the K40 mat is going to be the black and red or the blue and white that are both generally from eBay. And, I've seen some that, you get lucky and they last a really long time. But for the most part, the last two people that I did repair with were both black and reds. And I basically had to rebuild both machines. And one of the machines, the frame was so bent that even after spending like 6 hours working on the machine and getting almost everything functional, it did not run and could not be fixed. Or at least it couldn't be fixed in a cost-effective way. It would have actually been cheaper to buy a new machine because he bought it used in this particular case. There are pretty much always ways to fix almost any problem, but sometimes they do take a little bit more time or customization in order for that to happen. And in that particular case, we would have had to have built kind of like a custom mount for his laser tube in order to compensate for the bend in the metal. And he just wasn't willing to do that. And honestly, I agree with the guy in that case. Let's see. Thomas, yeah, I have been doing the class, but I'm also answering a lot of questions because there are so many questions that are coming out. So I'm kind of bouncing back between the fourth at the moment. Sorry that it's a little bit confusing. Okay, good fiber units. All right, the last fiber question for this time. I will do a fiber class. Most of the fiber units are unbranded, so I can't tell you. That's really the answer. It's really hit or miss with the fibers. So, all right. we basically covered the difference between the American and Chinese machines already. We did a little bit on the laser cutting software. I mean, there isn't that much to do. So let's talk a little bit about basic maintenance. Um, so it's really important to keep your machines clean. And I've seen people that can literally go years without cleaning their machines. And what happens is anytime that metal contacts metal, you need to lubricate it and you need to keep that lubricant clean. If it turns black, it's time for it to go. And I use an orange-based degreaser in order to remove the old lubricant that's left over and any gunk. I really like the natural cleaners over the more harsh, unnatural cleaners. I just don't really want to hurt the machine in any way by accidentally cleaning it with something bad. Then you could put on any type of machine grease, really. And I personally use white lithium just because it's one of the first things I picked up and I just liked how it dried. It really can be as simple as that. But a lot of people use sewing machine grease or oil. Uh, and the one that I use, it's WD-40 white lithium, works great. So the amount of time that you actually have to clean it is a really good question that a lot of people ask. And it really depends on the amount of use of the machine. If you're using the machine, let's say 5 to 10 hours a week, you probably need to clean it at least once a month. And if you're using it any less than that, you probably want to clean it at least once a month. If you're doing over that, you may need to clean every other week or every week. It also depends on what you cut and, if you're full scale industrial. If you are, I really recommend keeping the machines very clean because otherwise you'll run into an issue sooner than later. Basically, one of the last repairs, the guy had not kept it clean, and what happened was he had a failure inside of the I can't think of the full name for it. But basically, inside of one of his brackets, he had a failure because he had a metal on metal contact that wasn't being kept clean, and it just kind of rubbed away, and it rubbed one of the ball bearings out of the part. So that's once that happens, that's a real big repair. It's a real big pain to fix something like that. You really don't want that happening. So let's see what else on it. Let's answer one or more questions here because I do see a couple of questions. Do I need to upgrade my lens right away? That's a really good question. No, you don't need to upgrade it right away. Honestly, my personal experience, I see a 10 to 20% increase when you upgrade the lenses and mirrors to the top. I have seen people that have done more scientific studies than I have that basically say they can get up to 50%. But I personally have never seen that. I've never been able to replicate some of the results that I see online. So it's hard to trust something, even if you trust the person, because some of these are coming from like RD Works Learning Lab, for example. But the problem is that even Russ, who runs it, sometimes goes back and finds that his original answers were wrong when he goes back. So I try to be as skeptical as I can and trust what I can actually, test myself more than the tests I see online, which I would say is probably normal for people. All right, let's see one more. There are a lot of things. Okay, there are a lot of things I like better about the Red Sail compared to Epilog Helix that I used for 6 years at Tech Shop. Yeah, very familiar with Tech Shop and the Epilog Helix. Personally, I don't like it very much. I don't like the way that Epilog runs. The problem is that it's less user-friendly, weirdly enough, because they don't give you as much control. And those two things sometimes sound like they're out of whack to each other, but they're really not. At a certain point, you need to be able to be given full control over your machine in order to do basically whatever you want with it. If it's locked up in any way because the software isn't properly designed, and that's my primary concern, then you'll have issues, and it is not easy software to learn. So Can you use air spray canisters? Alex, if you're referring to the air spray canisters to clean, absolutely. That is what I use. It is white lithium in an air spray, and it is made by WD-40. So you could use that. You could use the one that drops straight on. It really doesn't matter. So let's see. I heard a lot about compound lenses. What are they exactly? It's a really good question. So compound lenses are basically just two lenses, or it could technically be more, that work together in order to create a finer, more powerful focal point. And yes, there probably is going to be a very near future where compound lenses make a bigger impact on this part of laser cutting. You really tend to see them, in the higher end, and I'm not even talking about Epilog higher end, I'm talking about like car manufacturing higher end machines. But I have already seen people playing around with it. So I don't think it's going to be that long until we could see an increase in power or maybe even smaller, finer points that can cut. So I would watch that one because, it's starting to get popular. So Keith is saying, I've heard a lot about, that's one I just read, sorry. Is APC the go-to brand for lenses and mirrors and upgrades? I don't have a go-to brand for the most part. It's called, shoot, I need to think about it, but Light Objects or Light Object. They tend to sell American mirrors, and you generally want to go with anyone that's making them in America. A lot of people will say that they are, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are. So, it's a bit of a crapshoot when it comes to them. So what I really recommend is, probably ordering, if you're going to that place, order just the nicer versions of things, then it doesn't matter as much. If you go for copper and gold for your mirrors, which tend to be the most reflective, and then you go for the HQ versions of the lenses, you're probably just going to get more, well, you will get more performance, but you may get the performance that you're looking for if that's kind of where you're headed. So let's see. So Catherine, I hated the air assist and the optical encoder strip for the X-axis. Yeah, no, I know what you meant. You didn't even have to say Epilog. So basically, no, I agree. And one of the things is that the way that they're built is that they're so tightly packed together, it makes it very difficult for it to work, and they have to put smaller versions of parts in. So, okay, I've been answering a bunch of questions. Let's go back to some of the basic maintenance, and then I'll just go straight back into full-on questions. So, for the maintenance, other things to make sure is that you are, running purified water. It really does matter. Don't run tap water. If you see gunk in your laser tube, like it's generally white, black, or green, that's not good. And you want to put pond scum remover into your system, run it for a week, replace all the water, and then keep going. So let's see. You need to replace the water about once every 6 months, and you need to make sure that your water levels don't run low. Otherwise, you could burn out your tube accidentally. So let's see, what else is there? The RV antifreeze. Yeah, you can. It's not my favorite. I have absolutely seen people do that, but people tend to do the RV antifreeze in places where it gets really cold. And my only potential concern is that it may have a corrosive aspect to it. So I just don't want to put anything in the laser tube that might be corrosive and damage it. Really, to me, the laser tube, which is the most expensive part, is the one you got to watch out for the most. So if you are in a situation where you need to keep it warm, then you may actually want to put in a box, a heater box essentially, on the line, because I know during the winter times, it just gets too cold. and it could actually damage the laser tube. It could damage equipment. So if you want to make sure in cold areas to keep everything good, you may need a space heater depending on where you keep it. You may also need to put a heater box on, and I've seen these done with reptile lamps, essentially. So it's really easy to do. It's like a 5-gallon heater with reptile lamps. So let's see. You change it every 6 months, the water. Freezing in the water. Yeah. And so if one of the other things is you don't want to let water ever freeze in the laser tube itself. You will probably crack it if that happens. So if you are in a situation where it's that cold, you do need a heater box, and you need to keep it running all the time, or you need to drain your laser tube every single time. But it's really easy to leave a little bit of water in there and do damage. I mean, it's really easy to damage these machines in certain parts. So what I recommend is going for the most foolproof method, and basically just making a heater box. There are even some of the CW5000s do come with a heater mode as well. So I believe they're a little bit more expensive, but it may be worth it if you are somewhere basically outside of Southern California, right, where it's still warm. All right. Yeah, well, 60 isn't going to damage it, but there are plenty of people around the country where it goes below that, and it will. So, and if, like Alex is saying, that your machine is affected by heat, it's really important to make sure that you have a proper water chiller. You'll need a CW5000 or 5200 in order to make sure that it stays cool. And basically, what I recommend is that you just keep it clean. You know, you have to clean out the air filter on those about once a month. It's just basically dusting it. If you work in a wood shop environment, you need to clean it far more, because I've blown out parts. Anything that sucks air in can get blown if you work in a wood shop. So you may actually need to keep it more clean in those type of environments. Cap, yeah. So I've never seen condensation on the outside of a tube, so I would need to know a little bit more about what exactly is going on in that particular circumstance. I mean, I would assume that the tube is a lot colder than it is outside for that to happen, but I don't know that it would actually do any damage. So Eric is asking, can you send me a link for upgraded mirrors and lenses? That's the kind of thing that you probably need to email me directly for, and we can go back and forth on that. But for the upgraded mirrors and lenses, for the most part, copper and gold, for the mirrors themselves, and then the HQ versions of the whatever lens you have, and there are a bunch of different lenses. But if it says HQ in front of it, it's probably a good one. Is probably the easiest way to do it. We could do a video on the different lenses at some point, but there's a few. Okay, so I will add my email right now. So I just put my email in, and I'll add this stuff to the description later on. And since we're just, doing a little bit of housekeeping as well, please don't forget to subscribe and like. It's extremely important. I do want to keep this channel going. I would like to do even bigger things with it. And right now, this is the easiest way for us to start, but that doesn't mean that I can't do completely other different types of videos if you guys are interested. So if you are interested, do let me know in the comments. It's really important. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We need to hit 1,000 subscriptions in order to really make this channel take off. That's kind of my current goal. And when that happens, we'll have some type of a random prize draw. It might be some, over the internet time with me, maybe a repair kit, that type of thing. But we got to get a little bit further down the road. So let's see. Let's take a look at some other ones. Sorry, I'm keep getting distracted.
Sorry.
Okay, so long hair. I basically have a stock K40, some structural mods, no electronic mods. What mods would you do first? The mods that I always do first on pretty much any machine, it doesn't really matter what it is going to be the lenses, the mirrors, the air supply in, and the air supply out. And what I mean by the air supply in is the air pump that you actually have hooked up to the machine. I tend to make that the largest one I can just so I have the option of going really high and then putting an adjuster on it. And then other than that, the suction out, super important. It could be even more important than the air in. And basically, what you want to do is you want to clear that smoke out as fast as humanly possible, because not only will it interfere with the cutting, but it will over time corrode the lenses and mirrors that are in the machine. So, like my machines, for example, they come with a 6-inch vent on them, and it's designed for a 6-inch pump. But what I did was I put an 8-inch pump on my machines, which basically allows me to absolutely maximize out the airspace in the machines. So let's take another look. No, no, Keith, I'm not giving away a red and black. So let's see. Settings for a CW5000 or 52. They're basically the same. I might have to do a video on that one. That's a little more complex than I can describe, but most of them you basically want to have at about 20 degrees. That seems to be the good ballpark. If you go 17 or below, you can actually set off the low temperature alarm. And if you go over 26, then you could actually have a high temperature alarm. And it is possible to readjust the machine in order to, go around these things, but you don't necessarily want to. But what you do want to do is, if you don't look at my future video of how to set one of these machines, do find a video on YouTube that talks about the 5000 or the 52. They're basically the same machine, and they're not set correctly. So you do actually need to go in and reset it, because they tend to be set a little bit higher than they should be. So a lot of times they'll go on around 25, 24 rather than 20 and hover at 20. I want my machines hovering at 20 from start to finish because it keeps the tube nice and cool. Okay, so let's take a look at some more questions. Catherine, if you have water in the tube and you're not working, it's even more likely to freeze. Your shop is below 52. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, just basically, as I was saying before, you got, if it goes too cold, you have to keep it warm. If it goes anywhere near freezing, you have to keep it warm. Or drain it every single time. Let's see. Okay, so Alex is asking again, if it gets really hot in the garage. I actually have a small personal air conditioner just for the purposes of the laser cutters. And it's not even big enough for it to cool my shop. So what you do is you basically point, the outtake from the air conditioner directly at the intake of your water chiller, and it will keep it cool, and you can run in hot environments. You may even consider building, like a little tent. I've seen people do things like that, or build it into a small box, so that way you can keep it cool. But make sure if you do anything like that, that you absolutely have a fire extinguisher, because if you put anything above the machine, then you can, you're increasing the fire risk. So if some type of fire really takes off and you don't have that, you're going to have fire in front of you, below you, and above you. So you don't really want that. And I recommend the CO2 fire extinguisher. So it's really worth the extra bit of money. If you don't get a CO2 fire extinguisher, the problem is sometimes people get what's called an AB fire extinguisher. and they're not rated for electrical fires. And what can happen is the electrical current can actually travel up and electrocute you. So you need to make sure at minimum you're using an ABC, which is rated for electrical, or a CO2, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's totally worth it. And as to that comment in Puerto Rico, it may not freeze, but it could totally rot out the water in your tube. The closer you are to water, the chances of you having gunk growing inside your tube and having a heart attack significantly increase. So you got to watch out for that. So you get your own special little things. Even if you're by a really large lake, I've seen people have increased effects of. It's essentially pond scum. So that's why you just get a pond scum remover, run it for a week, and then change out the water, put a little bit back in. You're probably good to go. If you're in a real emergency, you could do something called blowing out the tube, but I don't really want to get into that. That's kind of a little difficult, and you can damage your tube by doing it. Let's see. Not sure what you mean by ABC will save the house. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. No, I agree with you, Plasma. That, or you could just buy like one of those frozen bricks, and you could throw it in. You definitely, if you're still using the water bucket method, which I don't recommend, one, you need to make sure to properly seal it up and get actual O-rings and seal it. It really makes a really big difference. You don't want to let anything get in there. And two, yes, you could totally put frozen, water bottles or even, just freezer packs into the water. That's not a problem at all, but it won't last very long. It really depends on the level of production that you're doing. If you're just kind of, doing it at the level of a hobbyist, then the chances are you'll probably get away with it. But if you're running it for more than an hour, you probably need a water chiller. Catherine asks, what about the fire extinguishers auto racers use? It's a really great question. I actually have one built into one of my machines. They make great emergency extinguishers. However, the thing is that they are automatically activated, which means that you're leaving it up to chance. So I have both. I've actually had fires before, and I didn't necessarily even tell that there was a fire going on in the beginning. It felt a little bit warm, and then it continued to feel a little bit warm, which was odd. So I opened up the bottom of my machine, and there was a small campfire. And there was so much smoke coming out at that time that you could only do the extinguisher for a couple of seconds, and then you had to get away from it, which allowed the fire to basically go up. And Catherine, yeah, a fiberglass blanket is definitely a great idea. What I did was I got a fireman's mask, basically. So it's kept next to or on generally the fire extinguisher. And that way I could just put the mask on while I'm doing the extinguishing. The problem with using a blanket is that they don't fit in every circumstance. And in this particular circumstance, it wouldn't have actually helped because the fire was in the bottom of the machine, not the top of the machine. So, yeah, absolutely, Bob. So Bob is saying that the ABC fire extinguisher used as a last resort or it'll gunk your laser beyond repair. So that is absolutely why I use CO2. I have seen people use these before, and it is possible to repair the machine after, but you're going to have a hell of a time working on this thing if you do use an ABC. So what I do recommend is spend a little bit of extra money. And one of the other things is if you have to refill it, it's extremely cheap to refill a CO2 fire extinguisher. So once you have it, it's a pretty good investment. And you may even want to get a fireman mask like I did. I got a really basic one. It's only like 20 or 30 bucks. Might be a little harder to get them today, but if it keeps you in the fire that much longer where you kind of stay on it harder, it makes a difference. Because every time I blasted the CO2 again, it kind of spread the fire out a little bit more. So it's really important to be on your fire safety. It's like number one, honestly, when it comes to safety, is make sure that you have good safety equipment for fires. Every year, I have at least one person burn the shop down. So And I'm sure plenty of you have seen the photos of laser cutters that have been burnt down. And every 2 or 3 months, you'll see a photo of someone that's burned their laser cutter down. So you really want to be careful. So Catherine, I've heard the CO2 is cold and can shatter components. I wouldn't really worry about that. So it tends to be cold for a very short period of time, and where the fires are don't tend to be where the components are that can get damaged. Most of the machines have a separation between the electronics, the mechanics, and the lenses and mirrors and the laser. They're all in separate compartments essentially. So what happens is the fire, in my case, was below. It was in the bed because I had left too much stuff there, and I cut a really weird wood that was shooting sparks like 2 feet down to the bottom of my bed. So that's what started my fire. Most people, their fires, what happens is they leave something like wood or acrylic on, and they go to the bathroom or take a phone call. It's something as simple as that. And when they come back, the machine is fully engulfed, which is really why you cannot leave these machines alone. Even if you go to the bathroom, you need to pause the machine. Another solution is you could put a camera in the machine, but the problem with cameras is, one, there is a delay. So by the time you get there, it will be bigger than what you saw, but it will at least get you, it'll get you going. And Plasma says, never leave your machine cutting with cardboard. Absolutely. I mean, really, I would say never leave it cutting with anything other than like stone. I mean, stone is like what you can't even cut. You can only engrave it. Stone is the only material I've ever worked with that I felt safe walking away because you can't really set it on fire. But cardboard, I've seen the flame. I've seen like flames shoot out the little gaps in the cardboard like it's a tiny little flamethrower. So you really got to watch out for that. But wood and acrylic as well, particularly like acrylic, if you get it at exactly the right air heat mixture, you'll create a massive flame, and it's like rocket fuel basically. I don't think coal counts as stone, but I'd have to look that one up, honestly. All right, so Catherine also said it might be a good idea to have an automatic system in the base like we have in our stove hoods. Absolutely. You can buy those automatic systems, and they make them for cooking, and they tend to be cheap. They even have a thing that's called like a firebomb, or I'd have to look it up. I can't remember the original name, but it's a thing about the size of a bowling ball, and you could literally throw it at fires, and it just when it hits the fire, it explodes, releasing a huge amount of that ABC formula. So they're cool, but I wouldn't use one unless it was an emergency. But those stovetop ones, you can get them pretty cheap on Amazon, and they have magnets a lot of times, so you can just magnet it above the laser cutter, and then you tend to be pretty good to go as a last-ditch resort. I essentially am doing that with a race car fire extinguisher in my machines. So that is a little bit more pricey, but not only will it keep my machines cleaner if there's an emergency, it'll last longer. So that's one of my biggest concerns. Let's see. Yeah. So Bob says, do you feel the smell on the garage? I use a camera to avoid smells, the melted plastic. Do I need a better fan? Yes, you need a better fan. You probably you could either be having a leak somewhere, or it's just not powerful enough. You want to get the most powerful fan you basically can get and stick it at the end of the line. It will work better if you stick it at the end of the line. It's positive versus negative pressure. And so if it's like pushing the air out and there's things like holes, it will actually push smoke out through those holes. Versus if it's sucking it, what happens is that it will suck air in through those holes, and you're less likely to have a leak. So John asked, do I have a matrix of recommended power and speed settings for cutting? Yeah, I mean, I could share the one that I'm using for mine, and you could kind of do the math off of it if you want to. Most of my settings are for a 100-watt laser cutter. Most of my machines are 100-watt laser cutters. So yeah, I could definitely share that. And like I created that group where we could start sharing more things. And if you guys want specific stuff, you can email, or you could potentially ask in the group as well for things like that, and I will put it up. But the problem is that every machine's a little bit different. So even if you buy 200-watt laser cutters from the same manufacturer, they won't necessarily operate exactly the same way. Uh, there are differences in the focus and in the balance on the mirrors, which means that maybe one's 5% more powerful than the other one. And that 5% can be in the difference between burning the object that you're trying to cut or not burning it. And you could get into real trouble if you just try to stick with one single power. So what I'm working on, ask what group. I just started a new group, Laser 101, on Facebook itself. So if you guys want to look that up, that's a good place to go to ask questions. And, generally, you'd be surprised how much knowledge you guys have, and we'll be able to help each other out. Okay, so yeah, so I will, I will in that group put up the power scale. I mean, I see a few people are interested in it. But like I said, you could always start with the 50-50-50, and that makes a big difference, just figuring out from there. One of the problems with my power scale as well, potentially, is that it may be overpowerful for new machines and underpowered for old machines, because the laser tube does wear down over time. And, as gunk and corrosion build up in the machine and on the lens and mirrors, you will lose power. So, for example, I use my machines enough that between this time last year and now, my most powerful machine went from a maximum cutting speed on 1/4 inch acrylic from like 20, and I'm now down to 15. So 5 millimeters per second doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually massive when you're talking about doing these types of projects. And that's just because the laser tube gets used a lot. Let's see. I'll try to also put a link to the group as well on here in the comments later on. So you guys could always come back and take a look at that if you want. But let's see. Aaron, Thunder's lasers. Thunder laser appears to be a huge price difference over the K40, even for a Mini 60. Do you have any other recommendations for Chinese lasers? Yeah, I mean, basically, you're going to be talking about something in that price range. They're almost all going to be in that price range. Thunder is a little bit more expensive, but I could also put up a list of a couple of good ones. But honestly, I do trust Red Sail for the most part. I've had, like I said, some serious shipping issues with them. I mean, they owe me a machine that I ordered last year, so keep that in consideration. They have yet to ship that machine, and every week and basically every time I contact them, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're about to ship that machine." So they've been doing that for over a month. But it's also, weird times, and everything that I've been ordering pretty much from everybody has had some type of shipping delay. So you really need to keep that in mind, that it could be 8 to 10 weeks for you to receive anything right now from China. Let's see. Does running too slow of speed hurt the cut? No, it really depends, because there's a balance between speed and power. So, you know, if you're running at one speed but also one power, you're not going to be doing very much. But if you're running at 100 speed and 100 power, you could potentially be blasting through the material depending on what it is. Oh, and another quick tip: I never recommend running a machine over 80, 85%. They go into a thing called overdrive mode when you get above that. And what happens is you get very little power increase once you go above 85%. And you're actually really running out the tube faster. So I generally recommend just keeping it at 85% maximum, no matter what machine you're running. Let's see. Yeah, so Catherine was talking about the automaker shortage, and yeah, I would say they could potentially be having something similar. It's really hard to tell because they honestly won't tell you. They just keep telling me that they're ready to ship the machine all the time, so something's going on. But I also, keep some tabs on what's going on in China. So I know that they're also having massive shipping issues in China. They're having issues where some towns won't allow truckers to exit the trucks because of coronavirus, and they don't, like, literally, it's like they're stuck at the port for 15 plus hours, sometimes more than that if there's a problem, and they're not allowed to exit their trucks. So there's just massive lines of trucks lining up at the port. And so basically, the problem is continuing to compound. But eventually they'll get through it. Let's see. Chris, I don't really understand your question. So let's see. Yeah, so Alex, you know that excess pieces falling down when you're cutting with the laser reach all the way down can create a fire. Absolutely. And that's basically what happened with me. At the moment, what I actually do is I keep some cookie trays in there. And what that allows me to do is to easily remove debris on a fairly regular basis. So pretty much every week at minimum, or if I'm going to cut something special, I will take out the cookie trays and clean them and put them back in. So let's see. Yeah, you got to definitely be very careful about using these things in homes. It's one thing to burn down a shop, particularly if you have insurance, which I very much recommend getting if you are running a laser cut shop. The cost of insurance is very low compared to the benefit that you get from it. And these machines are a natural fire hazard. So you really need to be careful. I mean, you're literally shooting lasers and burning things. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. Okay, yeah, I could talk about the MA meter a little bit. So I do really like having an MA meter in the machine. It's not 100% necessary, but it will definitely help you control where you are with the machine. I can't really talk so much about the upgraded controller because I've never done it. I tend to not do, I know what it is, but I haven't done that particular one because I just buy machines that have good controllers in them to begin with because I go into full production. I don't do a lot of custom upgrading. I tend to do OEM upgrading or OEM changes rather. Oh, and most machines you want to go to about a max of 30, 35 milliamps. If you're going above that, you probably have a problem. Let's see. Yeah, the US is definitely having the same problem. The ports in the US aren't that much better, but we're not trapping people in trucks. Yes, Chris, I love that question. So yes, just sitting there, the tube will decrease in power over time. They do have a shelf life. The shelf life tends to be between 3 and 5 years, but it depends on the quality of the tube. If it's one of these black and whites, you're probably not going to ever get more than 3 years out of it. But if you buy one of the really high end ones, I've seen them last up to 10 years. All right, so I'm just going to take one or two more questions at this point, and then we're going to wrap it up. So, um, okay. So, A Geek, also another really good one. So, what are your thoughts on replacing the honeycomb with a solid sheet like Russ did? I actually, well, you have to remember that Russ isn't generally cutting things straight on the bed itself. He uses razors for the most part to raise things off the bed. I don't generally agree with doing a solid sheet. There are certain circumstances where you could totally use a solid sheet. Like if you're cutting a bajillion little pieces, sometimes it might make sense to have a solid sheet there to catch the pieces under the razors. But other than that, you need to have something that's sucking the air through as much as possible or off the top. But it tends to be sucking it through the bottom. So it has to be open. And the less contact you have with metal, the better off you are. The metal every time that you hit metal, it reflects back, and it's just going to cause damage potentially. So you got to watch out for that. All right. So this will be, I think, the last one since we're a little over an hour here. Two replacements happening ever. So yeah, you definitely have to replace tubes. It happens a lot. all you have to do is forget to turn on your power supply, and then or I'm sorry, you only have to forget to turn on your water chiller. It only takes 90 seconds of running the laser to blow a tube, and I've even done it before. It's really easy to do. So that's why I generally recommend having a setup where the chiller is connected to the machine and prevents it from running when possible, but that's not always possible. And then as to the cleaning routine, you're just going to have to watch earlier in the video. We did talk about the cleaning routine about halfway through the video. So that's about it, guys. I'm going to have to wrap up at this point, but don't forget to please subscribe and like and comment. I will put that one chart out that you guys asked me to put out. And, you know, if we get a good response from this, I will continue to do these videos, and I don't know on what basis yet I will do these. It really depends on the response. But the faster we get to 1,000 likes, the more likely I am to do something like this on a weekly basis. So that's something to keep in mind. And sorry, Catherine, you're going to have to wait for the next one or ask that on the group. So that's going to be about it for today, guys. So everyone have a good night.